Now, all through the night and into the morning and the day, a queue of mourners has been filing past the coffin of Queen Elizabeth. She was lying at rest in St Giles's Cathedral in Edinburgh, a final chance for the people of Scotland, the country where she died, to say farewell to the late sovereign. Her body is now taken to London, where she'll lie in state in Westminster Hall from Wednesday. Meanwhile, King Charles III has been greeting well-wishers during a walkabout in the village of Hillsborough in Northern Ireland. He later met the province's leaders and received a message of condolence. His visit is part of a tour of the United Kingdom after the death of his mother, the Queen. Well, for more on this, let's turn to one of the UK's top royal commentators, Richard Fitzwilliam, who is also one of Britain's best-known art historians, and he joins me now from London. Good to see you, Richard. And British officials saying they're expecting 500 foreign dignitaries to attend Queen Elizabeth's funeral next Monday. Invitations have apparently been sent to the heads of state of all nations with which Britain has diplomatic relations. Russia, Belarus and Myanmar have been omitted. And it's no surprise that they haven't been invited, is it?
No, it's not, because obviously there's something especially unpalatable which viewers will be well aware of in the case of Russia and Belarus, and the regime in Myanmar is undoubtedly a brutal one. That is absolutely clear, and I think that's very important, and I'm sure that the Queen would, so to speak, have approved of that choice.
And I understand that such are the numbers of foreign VIPs that most will have to travel to Westminster Abbey by bus from a secure location in West London.
Yes, indeed. And now that won't please everybody, but it is the issue of security that's paramount. Apparently, there will be certain exceptions. Obviously, President Biden, the President of Israel, will be one or two others, I understand, so it's reported. But yes, this is a rather curious way of handling it. But when you're dealing with probably more heads of state than attended the funeral, and we're comparing it now with Sir Winston Churchill's funeral in 1965. I mean, that was the template for these events over the last century. And the Queen, of course, a figure of worldwide renown, no equal, really. And this will be the way Britain, the Commonwealth, and the wider world pay tribute to someone who, if I may quote from Shakespeare, this is what King Charles has done on a couple of occasions. The less unparalleled, I think, is an appropriate one from Antony and Cleopatra. I mean, she really was a phenomenal figure on the world stage, as well, of course, as the one constant in 7 decades of seismic change in Britain.
Well, absolutely. So really the end of the second Elizabethan age and a new future begins. Is it fair to call it the Elizabethan age? Because, as you said, it was a whole era of 70 years.
Well, I suppose the two sovereigns that actually gave their name to an age were Elizabeth I in the 16th century and Victoria in the 19th. And indeed, to summarize how people feel about the Queen, I think it's appropriate to quote Elizabeth I's famous golden speech, where she said, "Though God hath raised me high, I count the glory of my throne that I have reigned with your love." Now, today, love is what people feel for the late Queen, and it's very hard to believe she's no longer with us. So much changes. It's not just the national anthem and coins and stamps. It's the extraordinary empathy, the personality and presence, the dedication to duty over all the years since 1947, when as Princess Elizabeth she broadcast from Cape Town and swore to serve her whole life.
So, as you said, an era coming to an end for the monarchy, the machinery of state in Britain, for the British people and for millions of people around the world, including places like Nigeria, Commonwealth countries. How do you think that era will be judged?
I think it will be judged, insofar as the Queen is concerned, as something where she has a very special legacy. I would say that the highlight of her reign, undoubtedly, in my opinion, was firstly the nurturing of the Commonwealth. I don't believe it would have existed in its present form without her. And secondly, the trip, the state visit in 2011 to Ireland. It put the seal on the peace process. No British monarch had been there for a century, and that was followed by a state visit from the Irish president. It was much more than a diplomatic success. But also, if you look over the years, most of the Queen's reign was very favourable for the monarchy, but the 1990s and recent periods were not. Equally, always there's been terrific support personally for her, and that includes Republicans. And also, there's little doubt also that the way she handled things, after all, she came from a period where things were so deferential in the 50s. She never gave an actual interview. She talked to camera on occasion. She preserved a very important mystique where no one knew her view, whether it was on Brexit or whether it was on the numerous portraits that were painted of. I'd love to have heard that. And of course, she was such a wonderful, as I've met her on several occasions, and sense of humour, dignity, charm, and her enthusiasms from being one of the world's equine experts. I was at Ascot in 2013 when a horse estimate won the Gold Cup, and the joy when we got film clips of with her trainer. That was absolutely marvellous. And of course, the corgis. What other head of state could be accompanied by James Bond to the Olympics and parachute into the arena and give an audience to Paddington Bear on her Platinum Jubilee celebration?
Well, I think I've seen a lot of photos of you on social media amongst sort of royal circles. But going beyond the Queen herself and turning to the new king, beyond the regal fantasia, if you like, of his coronation, how different will King Charles be from his mother, Queen Elizabeth, as monarch?
That is a very significant question, and one that he attempted to answer in his address. Firstly, it was based on the Queen's pledge to serve her whole life. We know that he's 73, so obviously his will be much shorter. But again, it will be a recognition that the job is to be advised by ministers, to encourage and warn, to sign bills, red boxes, opening Parliament with the government's speech, and also, of course, his own on the Christmas message. But essentially, it is not a job for an activist. He created his own role as Prince of Wales. He'd done brilliantly. The environment and architecture, homeopathy, numerous charities, including the Prince's Trust, which has helped 1 million people, disadvantaged young people, extraordinary. But it's a different role now, and he recognised it with that opening address. Also, he once said he'd like to be a defender of faith, and he has told us he will definitely observe the Supreme Governor of the Church of England role. He will undertake that. It's a secular age. The Queen was deeply religious. Almost all British people are not. Also, of course, he extended a hand of welcome to Harry and Meghan, sending his love, and subsequently we saw the Prince and Princess of Wales and Harry and Meghan at Windsor all together. But before we read too much into that, it's well worth mentioning that this has been a problem for the royal family. And so far as King Charles is concerned, I think what might be of concern, what will be, is if Harry releases a memoir. I think when he made Prince and Princess of Wales for William and Catherine, I think that was very important. What sort of a king? Obviously, he's the most experienced in history as Prince of Wales. Indeed, I quote Charles from Alan Bennett's The Madness of George III, being Prince of Wales isn't a position, it's a predicament. Well, he made a remarkable position out of it. Now, of course, he's ascended the throne, and he'll be judged by his deeds. If it's anything to do with stamina and physicality, I have to say, in the first few days, it's been quite extraordinary and also very dignified. And there's been the spontaneous aspect of it too.
And you made a very interesting point there about the distinction between the faith and faith, because he said over and over that he wants to represent faith rather than the faith, which is the Church of England. But I noticed in his speech he was very clear that it is the faith. But beyond the dizzying array of causes that the then prince supported, some of which you mentioned, it also emerged that he was a regular correspondent with government ministers, urging them to act one way or another. And that type of activism caused alarm in some circles, didn't it? I mean, do you think he can draw a line between how he acted as Prince of Wales and how he would behave as sovereign? Is that type of activism likely to continue as king?
Interesting point, Charles, because I mentioned this. After a long legal battle, some of his so-called black spider memos, they were his particular handwriting, were in fact released, and it showed he was above party politics. There were issues dealing with defence or with armed forces, but also issues that weren't in any way especially sensitive. But recently, on the subject of sending asylum seekers to Rwanda, we know or appear to know that he thought that was appalling, and Labour opposed the policy. So, I mean, put it this way, people are going to be watching for any slip into any form of activism, whether it is an issue dealing with the environment or any other issue. So far as his role is concerned and his views, well, remember, there is the weekly meeting, usually on Wednesdays, with prime ministers, so he can give them then.
So in summary, it's been a long and turbulent apprenticeship, an apprenticeship often in the eye of controversy. But just before we let you go, because I know you've got other interviews to do, just bring us up to date with what will happen for the rest of the mourning period for Queen Elizabeth leading into her funeral on Monday.
What is happening is that, accompanied by the Princess Royal, Princess Anne, coffin will be flown. The original idea was by train, but that was abandoned, from Scotland to England. It will rest overnight in the throne room of Buckingham Palace, and then there will be a ceremonial procession tomorrow where it will be drawn, which the Royal Horse Artillery, in fact, will be responsible, and the Grenadier Guards, the senior regiment of foot, will be playing an important part in the ceremony. It will be drawn from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Hall, the oldest part of the Palace of Westminster. It was begun by William the Conqueror in the 11th century, and it dates back to medieval times. It was the only part of the palace that was saved in 1834 when the rest was on fire, and it was saved in the war. So this is symbolically very, very significant. And behind it, there'll be the King Charles, Queen Consort Camilla, other members of the royal family and their households. And this will be a ceremony that clearly is the first big procession. Then on Monday, after 4 days of the people being able to come and pay homage, and tens of thousands into the hundreds of thousands are expected. They're even talking about something like 30-hour waits and so forth, which is almost beyond belief. But there will be a huge number of people, just as being at Buckingham Palace yesterday in front there with the reporters. You could see these huge crowds that were descending near the palace just to be nearby as a personal tribute. And then, of course, on Monday, after a minute's silence on Sunday evening, we will have what I mentioned earlier, which I think will be perhaps the most impressive funeral ever staged, or certainly comparable to that of the great Sir Winston Churchill, who of course was the Queen's 15th Prime Minister. The Queen used to say of Churchill, he was such fun to be with.
And on that note, I want to thank you very much indeed, Richard. Richard Fitzwilliams is one of the UK's top royal commentators and also one of Britain's best known art historians. And he was talking to me there from London.